And joining the show now to talk Winnipeg Blue Bombers football is Zach Schnitzer, a contributor at Bonfire Sports. Thanks for doing this, man.
Oh, buddy, like I was saying before, you guys must have been so desperate. You're like the Bombers in the 2010s, like when we were 0 and 18, like desperate for talent. When we brought in Nick Moore, remember that? Kyle Walters had his first big swing was Nick Moore, and he was absolute garbage here. Yeah, nobody wanted to come to Winnipeg. It was sad. But anyway, yeah, happy to be on with you guys.
And now Willie Jefferson says, come on down to Winnipeg.
Exactly.
First in the West for 3 straight seasons, 4 straight Grey Cup appearances. Have the Hunters become the hunted now, Zach?
They have become the hunted. And you know what's funny? Like I was joking about, the Nick Moore signing in 2014, but like back then, just to get into the playoffs was a pipe dream for the Bombers. And 2016, we made the playoffs under who was it? It was Matt Nichols. It was Matt Nichols' first full year, and we made the playoffs, and it was like amazing. And even though we lost our figure to BC, we had made the playoffs, and we made the playoffs again, and we built our way up to the Grey Cup. But it's funny. It's like this is how people in Calgary must have felt, or the Patriots. It's like you make the Grey Cup and you win the first 2. It's like you expect to win the next one and the next one, and it's like Grey Cup or bust pretty much. And so you become almost entitled. But I am entitled. Like I am pissed off the last 2 Grey Cups. Like we lost by a combined 5 points in both on the last play of the game. And so you wonder, like, it's not easy to get, even though it's the CFL, and if you win the West, right, you only have to win 1 game to get the Grey Cup. But anything can happen in football: injuries, changes in personnel, the weather, the stats still that big. Sheldon, you're probably laughing. The stats still better than others. All those West finals they lost. I think of 2013, Saskatchewan came in and kicked their butts in that cold weather. But it's not a given that you get back to the Grey Cup if you're the best team. And I still think they're the best team in the West, and they are the hunted. But it's a bitter pill to swallow. And this Bombers team, it is again Grey Cup or bust.
There has been a bit of a coaching shuffle with the Bombers this year, but obviously names that are, familiar after years of coaching the DBs. Jordan Younger is now the DC. Richie Hall remains on the staff. And then after years of setting records on special teams, Mike Miller is now the special teams coordinator. What have you noticed from these 2 guys at camp, if anything, yet?
Well, it's been fascinating, right? Because you look at that Jordan Younger moving up to the DC spot, and it's like Richie Hall's still there. And then you saw, it was very surprising that the old special teams coordinator, Paul Boudreau Jr., all of a sudden was gone. It's like, what happened? Like the deck was shuffled here a little bit. And I think what it was is, with the coaching cap, they knew that they would probably lose Jordan Younger unless they promoted him. And they didn't want to lose Richie, so they probably, decreased his salary a little bit. But then you can't afford Paul Boudreau Jr. So then who do you promote? Well, the guy whose career just ended, who's the GOAT, right? Mike Miller. In fact, I know I heard through back channels that when Mike Miller passed Jason Araki for most special teams tackles, they actually got him a GOAT, skeleton from a local farm.
They're going to say an actual goat.
No, well, it kind of is, but like a dead goat. Anyway, wow. So but on the other hand, it's not super surprising because the Bombers gave up chunks of yards on returns. Like they could not stop returns. They were the least penalized team on returns, but and kick coverage, but they gave up a lot of yards, and it bit them in both Grey Cups, quite frankly. So maybe it's not super surprising. From what I've heard, I haven't heard much about Mike Miller as a coach, but the players, when interviewed in the preseason and in camp, have been glowing about Jordan Younger. They say he understands the game. He gets players. He relates to players well. Guys listen to him. He has great ideas. So from what I've heard, he's his promotion was taken really well by the defense.
Nice. So a price had to be paid to give guys like Brady Oliveira and Dalton Schoen shiny new contracts. So which of the offseason losses per personnel there concerns you the most?
That's a great question. I think it's Jeffcoat, Jackson Jeffcoat. The two Jeffs, right? They were the pillars manning the defensive end spots, and they would wreak havoc on quarterbacks, especially if you look at the 2019 Grey Cup. What they did to, what's his name? I don't even remember his name anymore. Who was the quarterback for Hamilton?
Oh, Dane Evans.
Dane Evans.
Yeah.
Kind of forgettable. Oh my God. Do you guys get this? Like, as you get older, like you don't remember things anymore. I used to remember everything.
So I replace useful things in my brain with CFL stuff, unfortunately. So
I don't even have useful things though.
Yeah, it's maybe that's coming. Maybe that's coming. 37 for me is in December.
Oh, so you haven't hit 40 like me, buddy.
No.
Just wait, Sheldon. Just wait, Travis. So like Jackson Jeffcoat, here's an interesting stat. Willie Jefferson did not record a sack last year when Jackson Jeffcoat wasn't playing. That's how impactful Jackson Jeffcoat is. I think Derek Taylor talked about this when they were actually keeping track of quarterback pressures, which is an important stat, maybe even more important than sacks. Jeffcoat had the most pressures in the league. I think it was a couple of years ago. So he was incredibly impactful, but he couldn't stay healthy. And so I think the Jackson Jeffcoat for me is 1A. I think he commanded too much money, exactly like you were saying, Sheldon. There's only so much bread, right? And so they have some guys behind him. Celestin Haba is probably the front runner, American guy. He had 4 sacks in 8 games last year, so he looks good. Taiwan Garbett and Chauncey Rivers each had a sack in the preseason game in Regina. They looked like they had good get off the ball. So I think that's 1A, but I think 1B for me is Jamarcus Hardrick. Of course, you Rider fans know well. Was that awful to see him in green when I watched that stream on CFL Plus? Oh my God!
It'll be awful if he
anybody
hurts
would
Key
like
and
him on their
Schaefer Baker.
Yeah.
What's that?
So it'll be awful if he hurts Key and Schaefer Baker after he keeps chest bumping him into the air.
I know. He's an energetic guy. You know what? Honestly, he's such a good guy that I can't even be mad at him. Like, he was such a good guy in the community and his energy. So I think that's also a loss. I mean, he's a right tackle. He's not the left tackle, so he's not blocking Zach's blind side. They do have Eric Lofton in, who's, you guys know, in Regina. He's a CFL journeyman. He looks like he's the front runner to take that spot. But when you're a team like the Bombers that relies so much on the run game, you mentioned Brady Oliveira for first down production. It'll be interesting to see how they adjust with Lofton, or it could be Chris Ivey is another guy who's played in that spot in the preseason and practice. So I don't know. I would say it's Jeffcoat. Losing Jeffcoat is tough. Losing Jamarcus Hardrick is also tough.
Well, I'll ask you a little bit more about the defense. It's kind of weird at this point in the preseason already having a little bit of injury problems. Adam Bighill's on the 6th game. I don't think they expect him to miss 6 games, but Cam Lawson, a D-line, on the 6th game. Demario Houston leaves to go to Calgary from the defensive back group. Is there a lot of positions up for grab in the secondary, and maybe even who's going to fill in for Adam Bighill? I don't even know if he is replaceable, honestly.
You know what? This is the interesting thing. Like, this is kind of a reload year. There's a lot, like, unlike the last 3 years when the Bombers have been dominant, there's a lot of positions up for grabs, just as you say, Travis. And it doesn't, like, we lost Demario Houston, but then also Brandon Alexander's been out, our safety, big hitting safety, although he's getting on in years. I saw him at FanFest. It was the Bombers Fan Fest today. I saw him outside the stadium and I said, dude, when are you playing? He said, I'll be ready week 1. So We're good at safety, but Nick Hallett has filled in well behind him at safety, the Canadian guy. He laid a licking on AJ Ouellette in the preseason game the other day. Like, I didn't think people could hit AJ Ouellette that hard and him not, get thumped a little bit. But, so I like Nick Hallett, but yeah, Biggie's a tough one to replace. And honestly, the guys behind him who can play middle linebacker, even if they had an ounce of the talent, he's really the quarterback of the defense. On the other hand, I do think, and I hate to say this because I'm afraid Biggie will hear this and like just crush my head between his thumb and forefinger. But he's lost a step. He really he struggled with injuries. You saw that in the Grey Cup last year. I think he's lost a step. So who's behind him? It's Shane Gauthier, who's a Canadian. He's okay. He's more of a special teamer. I don't think he's the guy you want to be your starting middle linebacker. And there's a couple other guys behind him. Moses, Jamel. I don't know these guys full well. So that's definitely a concern, especially the Bombers have really done a good job at stopping the run in the past few years. But DB is also a spot that is interesting because Mario Houston left. Winston Rose seemingly is unsigned still. I think he kind of lost a step, and he was replaced by a guy named Jamal Parker, who looked really good at the cornerback spot. But Jamal Parker himself is on the 6th game.
Yeah.
So not only is Biggie, it's also Jamal Parker. And unlike Biggie, who O'Shea said probably won't need the whole 6, they haven't mentioned Jamal Parker's health. So he looked really good. He's not playing. So who's left? Right now at DB, we've had a guy named Tyreek McGee, who was here last year for Bombers camp. He's looked pretty good in camp and also in the preseason. He played quite well. And then, of course, there's Canadian Tyrell Ford, brother of Trey Ford, who was with the Green Bay Packers last year. He's looked really good in preseason and camp. So I think, and also to have a Canadian cornerback. I don't know you guys named maybe another one, but I can't think of a Canadian. It's not a position that Canadians usually play, right? Maybe, I don't know, what did Davis Sanchez play? Was he a cornerback?
He might have been half even. I don't even know.
Or a halfback?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember. So
Glenn Suter.
Glenn Suter.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah, he played safety. So, yeah, it's a tough one. It's a tough one, man.
Where they hide the Canadians. Anyway, Tyrell Ford has looked really good. So I'm excited about him. I'm not too concerned because then at the halfback position, we've got CFL West All-Star Evan Holm coming back, and then Dietrich Nichols, who I think is one of the most underrated players in the CFL. He's kind of like one of those guys. He doesn't get a lot of stats and a lot of All-Star nods because nobody throws the ball at him because he's just that good. So I think we'll be okay. And then rounding up the defense, we've got at will linebacker is Kyrie Wilson, who I also think is extremely underrated. And then at strong side, at Sam, we've got Retta Cramdy, who took the position over from Alden Darby, who was very good. So Retta Cramdy supplanted him. And then there's another guy named Brian Cole, who's kind of he can play a run-stopping linebacker role, but also can play the Sam, which is pretty incredible. He's also a good special teamer. So he's an American who I think can fill in at that spot. So I think we'll be okay on defense, but I think the defense for the Bombers will take a while to gel.
Awesome. So let's switch gears to receiver. So Nick Dembski, Drew Wolotarski, Kenny the King Lawler, and Dalton Schoen remain, but Rasheed Bailey and Brandon O'Leary-Orange are gone. So is there any room for a new face to make an impact, and who do you think that might be?
That's another interesting camp battle, right? Because who's going to play that fifth American receiver spot vacated by Rasheed Bailey? Now, Rasheed Bailey, for a guy that was maybe not as highly touted and didn't get as much production, still had over 500 yards of offense and 6 touchdowns. That's pretty good production for your receiver behind Dalton Schoen and Ken Waller. So who's that fifth American? And he was also an incredible blocker, by the way, very physical, versatile. He could run the sweep. He could go downfield. He could be a possession receiver. So Rasheed Bailey is a big loss. Honestly, it's hard to say. There's a bunch of guys that are battling for that spot. One guy that my hombre DB likes is a guy named Josh Johnson. He's a big receiver. I think he's about 6'4". He didn't play in the preseason game. I'm not sure if he was nicked up or they just didn't really even think they needed to look at him because he's played with the ones in camp so far. And then there's another guy with the ones named Cody Case who has looked good. So there's a couple of guys there, but they brought in a lot of receivers this year. So we'll see. It should be interesting.
Yeah. And then also, so making his return to the Bombs after a few years is Chris Streveler. So what are we expecting from Chris Streveler back in the blue and gold?
Well, let me say this, and this might be hyperbole, but I'm an idiot fan, and like I'm not an expert. I'm just a fan. And as a fan, I can tell you, I think if Chris Streveler had played in the last two Grey Cups for the Bombers, they would have won the Grey Cup both years. I think he is that important to the Bombers. You saw it in the 2019 Grey Cup.
Yeah.
He's not a backup quarterback. Yes, he runs short yardage, which is typical of the CFL backup. He's a change of pace 1B to 1A of Zach Collaros because he has a bunch of packages that Buck Pierce, the offensive coordinator, will use him for. So he can run. I mean, he can truck guys. Like he's built like a linebacker. And he's blazing fast. So he can truck guys. He's really big. You saw it in the preseason game on the run pass option, the RPO. So he can fake the handoff. He can hand the ball off. Teams don't know what he's going to do. And then, of course, now this isn't his strong suit per se, but he can throw the ball. Who is it? Sapamon, who just hates Chris Streveler? He says, he's got a noodle arm. He can't throw. He isn't going to beat you with his arm. But if you're a defense and you've had to prepare against a classic pocket quarterback named Zach Collaros, who's arguably the MOP of the league every year since 2021, and then you have to prepare for Chris Streveler, who's going to run. Is he going to pass? Is he going to hand the ball off? Heck, are they going to have two quarterbacks on the field? Someone's got to do it. Who's going to be the first team to do it? It could be the Bombers, right? Because Chris Streveler can also catch footballs. So he caught a football from the, I think it was it Brett? Oh no, it was what's his name? Who threw that ball? See, I don't even remember names anymore, guys. It's really pathetic. Darvin Adams threw a pass.
Oh yeah, Darvin could throw. Yeah,
Darvin could sling it. So I think Chris Streveler is a 1B. I think he can play the traditional short yardage role, but then he can drop back and toss a rainbow to Nick Dembski, who's one-on-one coverage with the safety on a second and one, right? So I think he's extremely versatile, and I think it's an already number one offense in the Canadian Football League. I think they'll pick up right where they left off.
One thing I'm interested about is kick returner, and the Lions and the Bombers, they've been so close, and it almost comes down to things like special teams and even home field advantage in the West Final. And Janarian Grant has demolished the Lions over the past couple years. Now he's not there. What's the kick return situation looking like in Winnipeg?
It's a great question, and it's a little scary as a fan because Janarian Grant was that impactful. You saw him return one first time ever in a Grey Cup a couple of years ago. Like you said, Travis, he's really feasted on the Lions. I'm not sure what it is, but he's really ate their lunch. And I don't know what happened with Janarian Grant, to be honest. Like nobody knows where he is. Mike O'Shea was asked, like, where's Janarian Grant? He's like, sometimes these things happen. And it's kind of a mystery. And it's like, what? Like, what happened there? So weird. I think what happened is he wanted more money. I think he's also been injured. And I think, like you were saying, Sheldon, there's not enough money to go around when you pay Brady Oliveira that kind of money, when you pay Zach Collaros that kind of money, when you retain Dalton Schoen, when you retain Sam Bryant and Waller. So there wasn't enough money, even though I think he's the all-time leader in kick return touchdowns in Bombers history. So there were 4 or 5 guys who were auditioning for the role in the preseason game in Regina. None of them really stood out. They all kind of were about the same. One guy who I thought looked maybe a little bit of a nose ahead of the other guy was a guy named Chris Smith. But there was a guy named Aaron Cruikshank who didn't look too bad. But that if the Bombers don't clean up their kick coverage, they're going to need to flip the field in other ways. And that's kick return. And that's what Janarian Grant brings or brought, right? And I guess the last thing I'll say on this is there's a guy who's unsigned right now named Chandler Worthy. No one has signed. He was second in the league last year in kick return. He was kind of made redundant by James Letcher. Yeah, his name is. So he's a guy who's a big play returner. but it doesn't look like they're going to bring him in. So unless they're negotiating right now, or they hope to see something from one of these random guys that they brought in, I don't know. It's definitely, as a fan, something that I'm concerned about.
Now, at the beginning, I asked you about the hunters becoming the hunted, and now I'm just thinking out loud here. The last three West Finals, I think BC goes to Winnipeg, and I know Rourke played injured 2 years ago, but I think they get to now Princess Auto Stadium, and they're like, I don't know what to do. I can't hear myself think. The Riders go there in 2021. They force all these turnovers and still lose the game. Like, is it essential that the Bombers have home field at West Final to get back to the Grey Cup for a fifth straight year?
Kyle Walters, our GM, talked about this years ago before this sort of dominance happened. He said, our goal every year is to win West, because you only have to win one game to get to the Grey Cup, and you're at home. And we do have a rabid fan base. I'm not saying we're louder than the good folks in Regina at the toilet bowl, but we're pretty loud. No shade to the toilet bowl. I haven't. I'm sure I'll be crushed. I'm sure I'll love it. Because I have never experienced, because I'm a fan first, right? So I sit in the stands, and I have never experienced a crowd like the past three West Finals, particularly that one in 2021 against Saskatchewan. That was just a BC thing.
Is that the game Lucky Whitehead went to when he was a BC Lion?
No, I think that was 2 years ago. Lucky Whitehead came to a game. He was still a member of the BC Lions, but I guess he was injured. So he was sitting in the stands with fans wearing a beanie. I don't remember why he was wearing a beanie, but it was cold. And yeah, I was like, what are you doing? And then people were like, is he coming back to Winnipeg? What's going on here? Who's he cheering for? So I think home field advantage is extremely important for the Bombers, like any team, but especially when you have a rabid fan base, like we do in all the Prairie teams, right? Maybe I'll include Hamilton there. We have that advantage of the cold. So I think it's important. Is it absolutely necessary? Do I think the Bombers could win on the road? Sure, they can win on the road, but it's not as easy. You go into Mosaic Field on a cold November afternoon,
and they've done well there in the playoffs. So
they have, except that damn Grey Cap.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I think it's important. I don't know if it's essential, but I think it's certainly important.
Well, and then last thing I'll mention, the Bombers posted a $5.9 million profit last season. I think they're clearly the flagship team in the CFL right now. This year, it seems like they want to try to keep the core together the best they can for the Grey Cup in 2025, and then maybe a more fulsome reload a little bit to the roster. Do you get that sense as well?
I do. Like you saw in 2012, the home field advantage, or 2011, I guess the Lions won at home.
Yeah.
It was 3 years in a row. Then the Argos won at home in 2012 for the 100th Grey Cup. The Riders win at home in 2013. I was at that game. It's an incredible home field advantage. Hamilton 2021 in overtime. I was at that game too. That was the best football game I've ever seen.
It was wild.
But anyway, it was wild. But I think that 2025 home field is really interesting for the Bombers, and it's kind of coincides with where you start to think, is Zach Collaros going to continue as the 1A quarterback of the piece of this team in 2025? He's getting on in years, right? So it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see what they do in 2025. I expect, like you were saying, they're trying to keep the band together so that they can make a real run at the 2025 World Cup. But there's a lot of changes even this year, so especially with some of the injuries. So we shall see. I'm optimistic though. I think they'll do well. I think they'll struggle out of the gate a little bit, take some time to gel. Last thing I'll say though is their schedule kind of favors them. They've got 4 out of the 6 games to start the season are against Ottawa and Calgary. I think Ottawa and Calgary will both be better this year, but I still don't think they're the team of the crop in the CFL. And what better way to kind of gel against individual teams? So it should be an interesting season, fellas.
Yeah, we're happy it's here, and it sounds like the preseason might spill over until July for the Bombers.
I know, crazy schedule. Right?
Yeah.
And
well,
you know, did that preseason game happen in the time? I mean, are there stats for it? You know what Darren told me?
I think we have more stats than last year.
Well, better than last year. He said that when Genius Sports first got involved and they were going to revamp the stats, this was, I think, in June of 2023. Randy Ambrosi said that it would be fixed by July 2023, a month later. It's still not fixed.
Whew.
Yeah.
If I didn't meet those deadlines at work.
Right? I think yesterday, Toronto, the Argos were winning 90-2 or something. And, you know, there was 3 players on the field named, I don't know, Curly Gittins, Edmonton.
Oh, that's how bad it is.
Yeah. What is with all the Argos in Edmonton this year? It's interesting.
Well,
remember that a few years ago, all the Calgary Stampeders went to the Argos, and then all the coaches as well. Now they're all in. Now the Argos are in it.
Chris Jones with the Toronto Hail Mary. That's all it is.
Are you guys over? Have you guys forgiven Chris Jones? Right
I'm over it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He did what he had to do.
We actually had some good seasons when he left. It was Winnipeg, really. So that's who we blame. Anybody but ourselves.
We ruined it, but I'm glad that Saskatchewan fans hate Calgary fans more than us. So that feels good.
Zach Schnitzer is a contributor over at Bonfire Sports, and we'll see you at Mosaic for Labor Day, man. Thanks for doing this.
Oh, thanks. Honored to be on with you guys. Big fan of the show.
Make sure you subscribe to see more CFL content all season long, including all of our team previews heading into the 2024 season.